So for a warm-up, sometimes I'll practice doing this. I'll take a series of ovals and I'll draw them down onto a page. And regardless of their clarity, and regardless of their cleanliness, I go ahead and commit to the ovals. Once I have the ovals placed, then I put a center line on each one of them. And this center line starts to tell me something about the tilt of the head. Once I have the tilt of the head firmly in my mind, which way the head is going to be looking, then I go to work constructing the other lines. The next lines I look for are the chin, the forehead, and the side plane. The side plane being that little ellipse off to the left side of the skull that I just drew. The center line then gets re-altered to the outside edges of the skull that I've drawn, and then I can build the crosshairs. And the crosshairs are more akin to the hairline, the eye sockets, the bottom of the nose, and the bottom of the chin. So in doing this exercise now, what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to bounce around between all of the heads all at one time. I'm not going to focus on any one first and then go to the next one and then the next after that. I'm sort of doing this as a group project here, all of them together at the same time. I'm keeping my mind fresh and not getting bogged down in any details. And it's so easy to get bogged down in a detail. You don't realize it, but as you're drawing a picture, you're thinking a lot. You're thinking a lot about what you're doing and what you're making. You're thinking about your technique and your craft for the day. You're also thinking about how you feel. And how you feel is a direct reflection in how you develop the picture or what marks you make that day. So this other line that I just drew, that's the side line or the 3/4 edge. That gives the head perspective. The other lines, as much as they are important to the head, only describes the beginnings of the head. Once we get that 3/4 edge in there, then we have something perspectival to shoot for. So I have all the side planes blocked in. Now I'm going to go back across the head and I'm going to block out the other features. And yeah, I am holding the pencil like I'm writing. I'm being lazy. Laziness doesn't really get you anywhere. It just makes more messes. As you'll see, I'm going to get a little messy with my mark making here. I'm warming up. Am I warming up to making beautiful drawings, or am I warming up to the process of drawing itself? And that's something you need to consider when you're working. What are you warming up to? If you're warming up to finish something, then you better do your warm-ups that are more critical to refinement than they are to just building. This is a construction warm-up, so I can basically just chuck hammers and saws in the air and hope that I can catch them. That's what I'm doing. But if I'm going to be refining something, then I need to be very, very delicate about what I use, and I definitely don't want to be using any saws or hammers. Those are not delicate refining tools. I would be using files and sandpaper and such. And all of this is, of course, metaphoric to what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about here is that this is an exercise. Exercises don't need to be perfect. They just, in the end, the results need to be there, and you need to be able to judge whether or not you have a result that's sound or that is pleasing. But the exercise itself doesn't need to be a reflection of refinement. And I'm not doing that at all. As you can see, everything is quite crude. So now that I have all the crosshairs in the faces, and one of the heads I haven't put the 3/4 line in yet, where my hand is, where my knuckles are, that head in the middle of the drawing page is missing its 3/4 edge, but it has its ellipse. Hopefully I address that when I get to that particular skull and put the features in. Now, as part of this exercise goes, you could take it all the way through and shade these things to a finish. What I'm doing here is showing the exercise of just mark making. And the mark making that we're doing here is construction markings. These are not marks that finish a picture or realize it as a finished image, but rather these are the marks that you put into a picture that help you construct the finish. And usually these lines are very lightly laid in because you want them to disappear and blur out into the rest of the picture space. You don't want them to be the leading edge in the picture. However, this is an exercise, and where exercises are concerned, all you're after is a particular result within the exercise. So heavy-handedness, I don't care if I am in this instance, as long as I get some decent results within all of these skulls, that all of the features kind of line up together and that everything looks like it fits together within the skull space, the exercise has been successfully designed. But outside of that, I'm going beyond the exercise. Bonuses. Shading is a bonus. These hard outlines are not as important right now because I'm not going to be shading. They're not important that they have to be light and airy like they would be if you were actually doing a finished picture. All of these are primitive instances of the abstraction method. These are all Riley rhythms of some kind. I'm not putting in all of the Riley abstraction rhythms. I'm using only the ones that denote the major building blocks of the head. The nose, the eye sockets, the cheek planes, the cheek structure, how the ears relate to the chin itself, the forehead, those particular spaces. Everything else, all the other rhythm lines, the subtler ones, I'm kind of leaving out from this exercise. But another exercise to do, which isn't a bad one, is taking all of the abstractions that you have learned and redrawing them from memory to see how much of those abstractions you have committed to memory and how much you still need to learn, or how much more you need to add to your repertoire of the rhythms that you have been learning about. The erasing that I do in this exercise is only extraneous lines that get in the way of being able to see things more clearly. Those are the only things that I erase out. Otherwise, I leave most of my marks here on the page. It helps me to understand whether or not I get it, whether or not I understand what I'm doing. If I leave all the marks, or if I erase all the marks, then I don't really have a history recorded where I went and what I did. Because I'm building a false illusion by getting rid of anything that we could call an error. Doing that for more myself than anything else. But if I really wanted to do a good job of studying and give myself something to study from, then I would leave all of the mistakes behind as well in this very aggressive way of working here. So I'm completing the bottom half of the abstraction by throwing in the bottom plane of the jaw and then blocking out where the sternocleidomastoideus rhythms are. And that gives us the little V shape in the front of our neck where our throat goes, where our voice box goes. I'm also clarifying what are bottom planes by shading them all in. Here the face is facing downwards, so we're not going to see the bottom planes as much as we're going to be seeing the top planes. But I don't think I shade the top planes in on this one. I think I just leave them open. But the idea is that in this image, I'm now looking down at the person. I'm looking at the top of their head, the top of their nose, the top of their tooth cylinder. While most of the other images, we're looking up at them. We're looking up at the nose, up into the eye sockets, up into the jaw. You'll also notice that the abstraction that I'm using is very different from one head to the next. I'm actually creating personalities within each of these skulls. That's a very critical thing to remember. The abstraction that you're using is not fixed every time in the exact same way. The lines that you use are molded to the likeness of each individual. So if somebody is a wider head, that abstraction stretches wider. If somebody has a taller head, that abstraction stretches taller. If somebody has a longer nose and a shorter forehead, that abstraction stretches and compresses to accommodate that particular aspect of that person. This is a flexible tool. This isn't something fixed where everybody becomes the exact same ideal. The idealistic approach here, and why it's called an idealistic approach, we're taking things that are organic, and what we're doing is we're refining them, and we're looking for beautiful lines, beautiful passages, not clustered, not cluttered up, not heavily burdened, not over-refined, or overdeveloped rather, but refined in a way where we find elegance in all of the things that we're drawing. Bones. on a skinny person, bones look really harsh. They make a skinny person look very skeletal. But if you do those rhythms upright and you refine the bone joints, then that person won't look so skeletal. They'll actually look more beautiful, but beautiful in a very skinny sense. So that's basically, we're looking for the refinement. That's basically what art is, looking for beautiful lines. These abstract rhythms that have been designed by Riley and actually by Frank Brangwyn and other artists, these are lines of beauty. This is the way the hard bones and the soft muscles, this is the way the skin folds over things. This is the way everything works, but these rhythm lines are also the way everything works in such a way where everything comes together more elegantly. And it is reasoning without overdeveloping or overburdening with too much information. However, there are books out that explain these techniques, and the explanations are so convoluted that it makes this technique, or makes techniques similar to this, feel very complicated when actually they're really simple. And that's the idea of a technique, is to simplify a process that is very complicated down into something that's manageable by almost anybody. The reason for these techniques even being in vogue in the first place was because of the revolution of print. Back in the Industrial Revolution, we also had a print revolution. When we went into print mode, we didn't have a camera yet that was well developed to where we could use photography. So the artists were the photographers of the time. So our schools were flooded with illustrators, or flooded with good art instruction, so that we could get an entire workforce or an army of illustrators into the workforce right away. And in order to help teach all these people something very similar across the boards, techniques had to be developed. Frank Riley developed this technique along with several other artists that helped define terms and sequences and rhythms that artists never really had before. And it's possible that back in antiquity days that we did have these techniques, but they never were written down, so we could very well be redefining something that was already around long ago.